Let's talk about the tax that scares a lot of well-prepared retirees who did everything right, the widow's tax. It's one of the sneakiest taxes there is, and it can still sneak up on you even if you've been preparing for years. Because once one spouse passes away, roughly half of everything you've got going for you as a married couple tax-wise disappears. Your standard deduction is cut in half, your IRMA brackets, which determine your Medicare premiums, get cut in half, and your marginal tax brackets, which determine your income tax, also gets cut in half. The entire tax structure that you built your retirement around shrinks to half of its size overnight. There is, of course, one thing that does not get cut in half, and that's the size of your IRA. For super savers, if you have a large IRA and you've started those RMDs, required minimum distributions, your forced distributions are driving your income as much or maybe even more than your actual desired income or actual expenses. So the money that you saved up for two people to live on now has to squeeze through brackets built for one. And unfortunately, those brackets are half as wide. In just a couple of sentences, that's essentially what the widow's tax is. You have the same income or similar income, half of the room, and a much larger tax bill landing on the person that you love the most at the most financially vulnerable time of their life. It's not any fun to talk about, but we start retirement as the police and we end retirement as Sting. If you're new to the channel, my name is Benjamin Brandt. I've been a retirement planner for almost 20 years, and I want to help make your retirement even better. Now, smart super saver retirees have known about this widow's tax for years, and there are real ways to get out in front of it. You try not to let the growth of your IRA go unchecked. You spend a little more, a little earlier, maybe you retire a little sooner. You do Roth conversions in your 60s at today's lower tax rates. You start giving some of it away. Every single one of those shrinks the pile of forced income before it ever reaches the surviving spouse. And it's good planning and it works. But here's the problem a lot of you are running into right now. Even if you did everything right, most retirement plans are built around maybe a 6 or 7 or 8% average return. Pretty reasonable for a balanced 60-40 style portfolio. The trouble is the market has been everything but average. Even with COVID knocking things down in 2020, even in 2022 when interest rates shot up, in spite of all of it, plain index fund portfolios have handed back returns far bigger than anybody modeled, including myself. So picture the super saver who did everything by the book, and then the market handed them growth way beyond what their plan ever assumed. Their IRA didn't grow on schedule according to the plan, it grew significantly faster than that. And now even with great planning, the widow's tax is just waiting for them anyway. Usually much later in life, between 85 and 95 most commonly, exactly when your spouse is least equipped to handle a big surprise tax bill. So the real question becomes this: how do you protect your spouse from a tax trap that your own success helped create? That's why financial advisors build tools to navigate around these topics. I'm going to show you 2 of them today. The first is the one I used to use, and the second is even better, which is why I use it today, because it removes all the guesswork and most of the paperwork. All you've got to do right now is understand the plan in theory and have a conversation built around it. The actual plan, the real dollars and the real decisions, those come later after the first spouse has passed and we're able to gather some more data. Now, before I show you these 2 new tools, I need you to see the other half of the problem, because it isn't just your spouse who is exposed to this widow's tax, it's your kids. And in 2020, their half of the problem got significantly worse. So for decades, there was this beautiful little feature in the tax code called the stretch IRA. And here's how it worked. When you left your IRA to your kids, they didn't have to drain it all at once. They could stretch those withdrawals out over their own life expectancy. So a 50-year-old who inherited a big IRA could take small distributions for maybe 30 or 40 years, just a little bit each year taxed gently, while the rest of their inherited IRA stayed invested and got to grow tax deferred. It was one of the most powerful wealth transfer tools in the entire tax code, and then unfortunately it died. In December of 2019, Congress passed the Secure Act. It took effect January 1st, 2020, and for most adult children who inherited a traditional IRA, it killed the stretch completely. In its place came one hard rule, the 10-year rule. Empty the entire account within 10 years, and that's basically the whole rule in a nutshell. Now, here's why it matters so much for you, the super saver. If you've got a 7-figure IRA and you leave the entirety of that IRA to your kids all in one shot, well, they don't get to trickle it out over a lifetime anymore. They have to drain all of it inside of a single decade, and that decade almost always lands, at least partially, during their peak earning years, which is their 50s or their 60s, when they're making the most money that they'll ever make during their working career. And often they will receive the inheritance once they're already financially independent. Remember that super savers tend to raise super savers. So your lifetime of careful tax-deferred savings, that all gets dumped right on top of their highest income earning years. And of course, that means a big chunk of it gets taxed to the IRS at big brackets. So the IRS waited patiently for years, maybe for 40 years, and it gets to collect all that tax all at once at the worst possible rate. So now we've got 2 problems from the same oversized IRA. We've got the widow's tax for your spouse, and then the 10-year squeeze for your kids. Which raises the obvious question, is there one move that helps with both? And there is, and we're going to talk about it. But to understand why it works, you have to understand your single biggest advantage that you have over the IRS, which is that the IRS thinks in 1 year individual increments. Well, you as a super saver gets to think in terms of decades and across multiple generations if we do this right. Every single April, the IRS asks, what did you make last year? And that's essentially the whole game for them. They think 1 year at a time. They can't think across your lifetime, and they certainly can't think across your kids' lifetimes. They take a snapshot every 12 months, and whatever's in that time frame gets the taxes. But of course, you as the super saver, you get to see the bigger picture. You get to decide when income shows up. Do we pull some income forward? Do we push some income back? Do we spread it out over multiple years? We want to take that income so that it lands in the lowest brackets possible, not just for you, but also for your spouse and even for your children. So that timing power can stretch across 30 or 40 years and across multiple generations. And this is the principle underneath everything we're going to talk about today. The more flexibility you have, the less tax you're going to pay, simply because you are putting yourself in a position to have more chances to be right. And every tool that I'm going to show you today is really just a way to buy yourself more flexibility and more chances to put income where it's going to be taxed the least. So let's use that advantage. And let's look at the old way of doing it first. So the old way we used to handle the widow's tax was something we called beneficiary splitting, and it can still work in the right scenarios. So instead of naming your spouse as a 100% beneficiary of your IRA, you would simply split it up in advance. So that might look like 50% to your spouse and 25% to one child and 25% to another child. And the idea was sound. You didn't want your spouse inheriting your entire IRA all at once because that just rebuilds the same oversized account and feeds both the widow's tax and the 10-year squeeze once your children inherit it. So you pre-divide that IRA. And it worked, sort of. Here's the problem. When you split your beneficiaries in advance, you're forced to guess at two things that you can't possibly know. First, when are you going to die? And second, how much will my spouse actually need once I'm gone? And the second one depends entirely on the first, because how much your spouse needs depends on how many years they have left and what life costs by then. So you'll have to fill out the beneficiary paperwork in advance and guess 50-50 to the spouse and the kids, or 50-25-25, whatever your situation would be. And then life does whatever it's going to do. Maybe your spouse ends up needing more than you left them, maybe less, maybe a lot less. It doesn't really matter. The percentages that you picked years ago execute automatically, whether they still make sense or not. I think beneficiary splitting still makes sense in the right situations, especially if you are already at or near your average life expectancy, but I think there's room for improvement. The new method of beating the widow's tax is what we call disclaiming. That's the strategy we use now. And the magic of this plan is, instead of guessing in advance, you get to measure after the fact. The best part about disclaiming is there's only one bit of paperwork we have to do right now. You name your spouse as the primary beneficiary, they default to getting everything, and you name your kids as the contingent beneficiaries, the next in line. And that's it. That's the entire amount of paperwork. One beneficiary form done correctly, and you might already have it done, which is, of course, worth double checking. Now, when the first spouse passes, the survivor doesn't have to keep all of the retirement accounts they just inherited. Within 9 months, they have the legal right to disclaim or formally decline any portion of that IRA. And whatever they disclaim passes straight to the kids, just as if it had been left to them directly. So the decision moves from before death when you're guessing to after death when you actually know the numbers. And what's even better about planning this way is there's no big rush and there's no pressure at the worst moment in time. We've got the funeral, we've got a grieving process. Ideally, we've set money aside outside of the IRA for that. That could be savings, checking, whatever it is. The IRA isn't touched. And then we have 9 months to build a new plan for the surviving spouse. In the meantime, we are gathering real information about what life actually costs for a household of one. And you might learn that property taxes stay about the same, insurance costs stay about the same. Maybe we pay less for groceries, maybe we sell one of the cars. The smaller Social Security check disappears and the bigger one stays. What we're doing is we're collecting real numbers in real time rather than guessing. And then you sit down with your advisor and you recalculate the entire plan, just like it's day one of retirement all over again. Except now, instead of a 30-year time horizon, maybe it's a 15-year time horizon. And with a shorter horizon and clearer expenses, a lot of times you discover, well, we don't likely need all of this very large IRA. Real quick, if you love retirement content like this video, I think you'll love my newsletter. It's called This Week in Retirement. And I find the best stuff on the internet, and I put it right in your email inbox every Thursday morning, so you don't have to hunt for it yourself. Click the link in the description or visit thisweekinretirement.com. Let me show you a real fake example of disclaiming in action. Meet George and Louise Jefferson, two lifelong super savers that did all of the deferring and all the saving, and the market was very, very good to them. And by the time they're in their early 80s, George's IRA has grown to $6 million. Their piece of the pie, as it were. Their son Lionel is around 50 years old and pretty successful in his own right in the highest earning stretch of his career. George passes away first, as is usually the case, and Louise is the primary beneficiary, and Lionel is the contingent beneficiary. By default, Louise inherits all $6 million. Now, Now, I'm going to do some napkin math here using round numbers and round figures and some simple assumptions. Of course, over time, we would refine those numbers with a competent financial advisor and some real tax software. But even doing napkin math, I think these tax savings are really worth paying attention to. So we have two paths to help the Jeffersons plan for this next phase in life. Plan A is to do nothing. Louise simply rolls over all $6 million into her own IRA, which is what most people would do. But what they're missing is how relentless those required distributions will soon be for Louise. At age 80, she's forced to pull out about 5%, which is roughly $300,000, plus her Social Security, which was formerly George's Social Security. But by 90, that annual forced distribution climbs to over 8%, close to $500,000 per year as a single filer for taxes. So for the rest of her life, then, Louise is forced to take income that she probably doesn't need straight to the top tax brackets, paying the widow's tax every single year. On a $6 million account, the tax on those forced withdrawals over the last decade of her life is probably going to cost somewhere around $1.3 million. And because those big RMDs roughly cancel out the market's growth, that account is still going to be about $6 million when she passes, and then Lionel will inherit the entire thing and have to deplete that account within a single 10-year window. Remember, we don't have the stretch IRA anymore, we have the 10-year rule. Now let's compare that to path B, where Louise disclaims some assets. So a few months after George's death, Louise recasts her plan and realizes that she only needs about $3 million plus Social Security, and then she disclaims the other half, the other $3 million to Lionel. Keeping $3 million instead of $6 million cuts her RMDs, of course, roughly in half. So about $150,000 per year instead of $300,000. The tax on her forced withdrawals over the next decade drops from that $1.3 million that we talked about down to about $540,000. That's the real prize here. Call it well into six figures of tax that Louise simply never has to pay because she kept half of her husband's IRA instead of all of it. Now, what about Lionel? Well, I want to be careful here and not overpromise tax savings for Lionel, because for him, the disclaiming move might just be a wash when it comes to taxes, and it's worth understanding why. Because it comes down to when the money reaches Lionel. Any dollars that he has to take while he's still working in his peak earning years, they get taxed at his highest rates, just like they would have for Louise. But any dollars he can take after he retires when his own income has dropped, they get taxed far more lightly. So the benefit to Lionel isn't automatic, it depends entirely on timing. And possibly a bonus if Lionel is married and we can spread some of that income across married filing jointly brackets, which are wider. And that's exactly why we want to give him two 10-year windows instead of one. We don't know when George or Weezy are going to pass. We really can't predict that. But the two windows give us two separate chances to land some of that income into Lionel's lower tax years. More flexibility simply means more chances to be right. And the more chances we have to be right, the more chances we have to save a bunch of money on taxes. So the downside is roughly break even, but the upside is very real because proper planning just gives us more chances to win. So make no mistake about where the real tax savings here is. That's going to be for Louise, but any tax savings to Lionel is going to just be a bonus. And here's the thing I really want you to take away from these numbers. Every figure that I gave you is, like we mentioned, napkin math, very round numbers and simple assumptions. Your personal situation has more moving parts than we can account for on a napkin, which is exactly why you should sit down with a competent advisor and run your real numbers through proper tax software before making big decisions like this. And again, we're trying to make these decisions in advance in theory and then clarify them after the first spouse's death. But even though we're just looking at napkin math, let's look at some of these numbers. Possibly six figures of tax savings, which is really the real cost of not having conversations like this, both as a family and with your financial advisor. So yes, disclaiming assets is powerful tax planning. And I want you to keep your money in your family whenever possible. But planning like this has rules, and if you break any one of them, the whole plan falls apart. So we really need this to be precise. So here's what you want to do if you want to pursue something like this. The first one is the deadline. A qualified disclaimer has to be made within 9 months of the date of death. This is not the policy of your IRA custodian. This is federal tax law. If we miss this window, this option is really gone forever. Number 2, the surviving spouse cannot have accepted any benefit from the portion that they want to disclaim. So you can't take a distribution from your IRA and then try to give it back. You've really got to be hands off until the decision is made. So we very likely have to have outside assets to cover any near-term retirement expenses or funeral expenses or things like that. And number 3, and this is really the big one, the kids have to be already named as contingent beneficiaries with the beneficiary structure set up correctly before the first spouse dies. None of this can really be retrofitted after the fact. If the paperwork's not right, well, there's really nothing to disclaim to. There's no end after the primary beneficiary. And because the surviving spouse is the one that actually puts this plan into motion, possibly years or decades from now, during one of the most difficult times in their financial lives, the entire family has to understand this concept in advance. Both spouses need to understand it, and ideally you bring the kids in too, and your advisor or the executor of your estate or both, they really need to understand at least the broad strokes of this plan. Remember, that's the beauty of this plan is you don't have to do anything today other than understand the broad strategy and set up your beneficiary forms correctly. The actual decision gets made later on with more full information. By the way, if your current retirement plan is lacking this level of nuance, we can help you build a better one. We call it our Retire Ready Blueprint, and you can learn more at the link in the description. Thanks for watching.